Hello. I hope you can hear me. I hope. I've tried to do streams and my internet has literally decreased in quality. So I thought I'd record a video instead, and I think I might just record doing stuff rather than doing live streams, which sucks. And it's funny because like my internet isn't completely down or anything, obviously, but it's like at 50%, which makes my streams very slow, which sucks. But I wanted to come here today and talk about movies that changed my life. It makes me laugh because, like, how life-changing are they? Maybe not that much, but eh. Yeah, so let's do movies that changed my life. So let's go to Letterbox. They're definitely in my favorites. So we're just gonna go to Letterbox. I'm gonna navigate there for a second. Okay. I really need to start doing my watch list series again because my watch list series I think got me a lot of Letterbox followers, which I didn't really care about, but it was cool because it made me feel like I'm not talking to myself. But also my reviews aren't really funny, so usually the people with the most followers have funny reviews. Okay, so we're on my favorite list. So we'll just go chronological in, you know, I would have to say the first movie in chronological order would have to be Top Hat. It was made in 1935 and it stars Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, and it's a very old, almost 100, it's probably like 90 years old now because we're almost, it's next year's 2025. This was made in 1935. So yes, it's almost 100 years old. But it changed my life. It did. Changed my life here is used very loosely. In the way it changed, I guess it either improved my mood, it made gave me a new perspective, or it set me on to different things to watch. So that's what I'm defining as changed my life in this video. So basically Top Hat is, I think, the fourth or fifth installment of a Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers movie. And it, because they did made like 10 movies together. Okay, I gotta put on the do not disturb. But they made like 10 movies together. And so I think it was the fifth or the fourth, I don't know. But it's probably one of their most famous ones. And I say this changed my life because a long time ago, I did not come out of the womb and start watching movies. Um, I was never really a big movie watcher in the beginning, you know, as a kid or anything like that, until I came across Top Hat. So we had one of those, this was a long time ago. This was like 10 years, maybe 20 years ago, maybe 10. 10. So basically we had one of those cable boxes, before like streaming services really like was a thing. Um, and the cable box was kind of like we got it from like I don't know, some sort of uh seller or something. It's a long story, but I'll try to condense it. And so it was a cable box that actually gave you all these different channels. Like it wasn't, I don't think it was pirated or anything like that, but we bought it, you know, and we got all these different channels, like premium channels, all this different stuff. So at that time that was like really cool, so you could watch anything you wanted without like paying extra. And so we got that. And so one day I was really upset, and at that time I slept in my parents' room. My parents did not let me sleep in my own room. Um, this is mainly my mother. She was just like, I'm afraid you'll get kidnapped. So I had to sleep in my parents' room. And I think I was like in seventh grade or something. And it was an awful year for me. That's why a lot of times, like I say, like I would not want to go back to my childhood because of the school times. It was an awful year for me. So, I mean, also I make clear, like as a kid, I would just say some dumb shit. So, I mean, I would make people mad and stuff. But in this class, I didn't have any friends. So I tried to cling on to these two people. I'm gonna name drop them. I think her name was like Brie Wilkerson, and another person's name was Jenna Crone. I think she's married now. But basically, I tried to cling on to them. And obviously, I'm at that time I was very annoying. I would say dumb stuff that upset them and stuff. And so I totally take responsibility for that. But I mean, it's been years now, so they hold a vendetta against me. I mean, I don't either. But I don't hold a vendetta. But they definitely were really mean to me. Like they were super mean to me. They would talk behind my back. They would call me names behind my back, and then afterwards, one of them would like reveal this to me, and they'd be like, "Yeah, she's talking behind your back." And then, which doesn't make sense because like I don't know why they would just do that. They would do that to each other. They would like after being like after being really, awful and saying awful things about me, they would turn on each other's back and then be like, "Oh, she said this about you." And I'm just like, that didn't make sense to me. At the time, I didn't think about it because again, I was a person who was without friends in a class and I was miserable. And that was honestly a very miserable year for me. And then on top of that, I also was not my best because I tried to be mean at that time to other people. And the reason why was because I was getting bullied like so much that I was just kind of tired of it. So I thought maybe being rude to people would help me, which it never helps. And it just made things worse, obviously. But of course, me being a kid, I didn't really think about that. So, I had other people be rude to me as well, and they would call me names, etc. They'd tell me, "Oh, and so I had a really, really awful year there. Um, a funny irony is that one of the kids who bullied me that year, later on, when I moved to California, their brother's back home now, but their brother was asking my dad for a job. And they came over to our family house and they were just like, oh, like, their mom was just like, oh, you and him are friends, right? And I'm like, I don't know you. The reason I did that was because, here's the thing, like I don't want to go all into it to get off the movie thing, but it was just like he was just an awful person. And the audacity he had to say to his mom, "Oh, I know Aisha. I was friends with her." Dude, you weren't my friend. So I don't know what delusion you're trying to get into. Like you're not my friend. But I'm not interested in taking like revenge on him. Doing I'm not interested in talking to him at all. So that's why I said I didn't know him because I'm not interested in that. And then his mom picked up on it. His mom obviously didn't say anything, but she's like, she knows my aunt and she was complaining to my aunt. She was like, oh, she pretended like she didn't know him. His mom is already insufferable in the other sense. I'm glad they're gone. They all seem the only decent people seem is his older brother and his younger brother. The mom and the middle son, yikes. I don't care. So basically, yeah. To sum it up, it was an awful year. So one day I came across TCM, which is Turner Classic Movies. It's a channel that plays American classic movies, and some international classics, but mostly American. And they had Top Hat on, and I came across the scene where they were singing "Isn't It a Lovely Day." I remember all the songs because I've seen the movies like 100 times. Um, And so I came across that and I was like, wow, this is such a nice song and this is such interesting choreography. And I was so entranced by it and I was even surprised at myself because it was a black and white film. And at that point, I'd never seen a black and white film. And I was just like, I never had, obviously, like, I was like, you know, with anybody in this generation, like, why am I going to watch a black and white movie? Everything is in color. Um, so I was just very like, wow, this is such a you know, and continue watching those. And I loved the songs and I loved everything about it. And it surprised me because I really hated musicals before then as well. Because I remember I watched Mary Poppins. I hated Mary Poppins. I have not rewatched Mary Poppins since, but I'm sure I would like it and if I rewatch it. But also I watched West Side Story. I hate it. I still hate West Side Story. I do not like West Side Story. Um, so it was very surprising to me. that I ended up liking this film. And so it kind of drew me into this little hole of just watching classic movies. And of course, I started with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. So a lot of when I started watching movies, a lot of the movies I watched were their movies. And I've seen, I think the actor with the most films I've seen is definitely Fred Astaire. I've seen a lot of his films, and some of them I haven't seen because they're kind of crap, but I probably should see them out of completion's sake. But yeah, this was definitely an amazing, and this also got me into other musicals as well. Like I ended up kind of trickling down and watching musicals from the 50s, with Gene Kelly, Judy Garland, and it just really started like this whole thing for me, especially into American classics, because for the longest time I only watched American classics, and then as I got older, I was like, okay, why don't I start watching like international classics? Why don't I start watching modern films? Why don't I start watching anything and everything? And so that's what I pretty much do now. But yeah, this changed my life because it kind of brought me into watching films a lot, and a lot of people were kind of flabbergasted that I liked Fred Astaire because this is an actor that has not been popular since like the 20th century, obviously. And he was very popular in the 30s and probably into the 40s and 50s. But so somebody, like me knowing him was also just kind of weird for older people to, because they would ask me, they'd be like, how did you even, I'd be like, oh, well, I don't know. But yeah, it changed my life because also it made me feel better, which was ironic kind of because also these movies were made during the Great Depression. And a lot of people liking these movies would specifically go watch them because the Great Depression obviously had very in, intense repercussions, social, economic, etc. So whatever crappy day they were having, they would go to the movies, they would watch this, and hear rich people in, Italy enjoying their life, singing songs and, being happy and usually now people don't like rich people, but if back then they'd be like, oh my God, it's such a nice escape. So it was definitely a form of escapism in the 30s. So which was ironic because like, obviously I wasn't living during the Great Depression, but the only Great Depression was happening with me at the time because I was just had such a horrible, horrible day-to-day experience. And or also like, years later I reflect on my own attitude and I'm just like, why did I act this way? So, you know, uh, all around it was just awful. I was an awful person and then I was being bombarded with awful people. So it just made me feel better. And it was just like, well, at least I have these movies, and that's what changed my life. I definitely recommend the film, but of course, like I know more and more nowadays people do not like musicals. I mean, I think you can kind of expect that with like seeing the reaction people had to Mean Girls being a musical. Um, but a lot of the songs that were written for this were especially written for this film, and they're written by American, like very famous American composers like Irving Berlin. So a lot of American classics that were sung by like Ella Fitzgerald or, Doris Day or who Rosemary Clooney or whatever. They came from these films. A lot of American classics were from these films, like Cheek to Cheek, Isn't It a Lovely Day, Top Hat, White Tie Tales, No Strings. I know I remember all of it. So yeah. But basically, people didn't watch it for the plot. They watched it for the actors. They watched it for the scenes, the songs. Which is why I watched it because the plots in most of their films are very much the same. So yeah, so basically, let me read. Showman Jerry Travers, which is Fred Astaire, he's working for a producer, Horace Hardwick in London. Jerry demonstrates his new dance steps one late night in Horace's hotel room, much to the annoyance of Dale Tremont, who's sleeping below, which is played by Ginger Rogers. She goes upstairs to complain, and the two are immediately attracted to each other. Complications arise when Dale mistakes Jerry for Horace. And usually the common theme in some of their musicals is that behind them is like a cast of people who are just like really funny and stupid and do dumb things and yeah. It just first and foremost, if it isn't clear, this is going to be a very, very long video. It's already 15 minutes. But yeah. So this is I think I'm gonna try to split it up into 30 minutes, because this is gonna be a long video. This is gonna be a long, long video. So yeah, this was one of the first chronologically that changed my life. So let's go to the second one. Um, there's not really a set list, but I'll just pick out movies that also. Now Voyager. Now Voyager, I discussed this in a TikTok video because I actually bought a original copy of Now Voyager, which is very beaten up. I don't think it's a first printing, but it is definitely a rare printing, and I hope to get it restored. But Now Voyager is a 1942 film starring Betty Davis and what's his name? Paul Henreid. Um, Basically, it is a woman who is pretty much under the tyrannical rule of her mother, and it has basically made her so tiny in the sense that she's done nothing with her life other than serve her mother. And she basically just follows all her mother's orders, as well as just whatever her mother says, whatever verbal abuse her mother puts her down with. She's just, she suffers from it. And so she suffers from a nervous breakdown, and they call her sisters, call a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist helps her. She ends up going to this, little stay in a mental institution. It's like a nicer one because she's rich also. And so basically, the first thing he kind of assigns her, because she also kind of suffered, she's also in the house, she doesn't really do anything, doesn't really get out. In a way, he kind of like pushes her out there, kind of like exposure therapy, I guess. And she's like, he's like, you should take this cruise, and you should, you know, get out there, mingle with people, talk to people. Your mother isn't here. You're an adult. You can do what you want. And so she meets a man, and she falls in love with him on the cruise. And this movie really changed my life because it was a very interesting depiction of, kind of emotional abuse and for, mental illness in a very old movie. I wouldn't say it's like groundbreaking or anything like that, but it was interesting that it was, not offensive in any sort of way. Maybe a little bit, the treatment is a little bit quick. I don't know how long the time, but it was very interesting to say the least. It didn't seem offensive to me. I don't know. I mean, that's just my perspective, but yeah. And also, I related to the movie a lot. I some parts of the movie, no, but some parts of it I did, especially the emotional parts of it. Um, because of her rule under her mother, she's felt like she does not deserve anything. She does not deserve happiness. She does not deserve anything good in the world. And, I mean, or, something along those lines, and, or nobody loves her, etc. And I really felt that, I've definitely felt that in my life. I still feel that. And so that also, this is why this film changed my life. Because it was the first film I really, really s- saw myself in. And yet, it was also a film that didn't, you know, it didn't, wallow in her, in her sadness, but it set her free, you know. Even let's say some of these choices aren't necessarily morally correct choices, because the man she ends up with is married, so, but or she doesn't. I don't know. I don't want to spoil it, but basically, it isn't necessarily moral choices, but it's the thing. It's like, you can make mistakes. You can, you make mistakes. You do things. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. And it sets her free. It sets her free from her mother. It sets her free to be the person she wants to be, just by being loved by this man, even if it's temporary. Um, and that's what really resonated with me, as a film. And the film is so beautifully shot. And it's an interesting deviation for Betty Davis as well, because a lot of the characters she played in the 30s and 40s, I mean, even most of her like career, are very evil characters. Like if you 1940 The Letter, she played a really awful woman. Um a 1930s of human bondage. She plays a woman who takes advantage of this man continuously. Um, and she's just an awful woman. So, it was also an interesting deviation when you look at her work as a whole. Not that she hasn't played like dramatic characters that, deserve your sympathy, but she's mainly played characters that are very, very complex and malicious in a way. So it was also interesting in that sense, but definitely changed my life in a personal perspective because I related to it so much. And where are we at? We are at 21 minutes. See, this is why I just talk a lot. This is another film. This was a film I watched later on, not as a kid. But in my 20s, after I watched David Lean is a British director. He's known for directing Lawrence of Arabia and also lesser known. I mean, Lawrence of Arabia I feel is more popular than his other film, Brief Encounter. Um, Brief Encounter is also a great film, and I liked it. Um, but it didn't really change my life as a similar film he made that was not as popular as Brief Encounter, which is The Passionate Friends, 1949, stars Ann Todd, Trevor Howard. They're British actors, as well as Claude Rains, who's probably more well known because he was in Casablanca. Mm. So basically, a woman, she was in love with this man for years, and honestly, she's probably a character you probably should hate in the movie. um, but she's in love with this man for years, and but when she, married, she refused to marry him because she just felt like, if I married you, my autonomy would be gone, my freedom would be gone, but yet later on, he moved on and she married this older man who is richer and, can take care of her. And that was also a thing of, this original man. He wasn't rich either, but it was mainly, I think the reason she gave in the film was mainly because of autonomy. And so I really related to the film because the film starts out as it's New Year's Eve and she's with her husband and she sees the man she was in love with in the crowd celebrating with a woman. And basically it just kind of gives her like a flashback. And so they say hi, blah blah blah, and then they leave. She leaves with her husband and then she just kind of gets this flashback of deciding, oh, I didn't marry him because I wanted my freedom, I wanted my autonomy. And it kind of resonated with me because it also kind of some of the themes of the movie kind of plays into personal perspectives of mine when it comes to love. I always wonder what our society would be like if love wasn't really a thing that was hammered in so much. I mean, from the get-go, even as a kid, you have things about the prince and the princess and saving them, and children movies about these two characters ending up together. Books, and then you get older, films, rom-coms. Dramatic films, dramatic romance films. There's hardly, especially with American films, specifically with Western films, there are hardly films that have incomplete endings. I mean, there are films, of course, there are probably thousands of them with them, but more popular ones don't really have endings like that. There's always somehow they tie up the loose endings. Perfect example is The Lake House with Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. It was originally based off a Korean film, Ilmar, which was made in 2000. And in Ilmar, I don't remember the exact ending, and also I don't want to spoil it, but obviously it's not a more satisfactory ending as it compared to the American version. And with the lake house, they definitely tie all ends up. So, um, so it was a clear indication of how Western movies, especially, American films, like to have, you know, those things sort of tying all ends up, making it pretty, making it so, because a lot of times I've seen films with, there was this one specifically, it wasn't romance, but this one film where it was a Netflix film, and this girl made a time machine, and basically it was an incomplete ending. She did not solve her problem, you know, And a lot of people rated the film negatively just because the ending was not satisfactory for them specifically. And I don't fault them or anything like that. I don't say they're wrong. I totally get that. You know, you watch media, a lot of people watch media because they want to feel good. They watch media because they want an escape. You know, so it makes sense in that sort of way. But personally, I felt like the ending made so much sense. Now I'm gonna spoil it because honestly, who watches Netflix movies? No offense if you do. And it's also been out for years, so I'm pretty sure people have watched it. But basically, she goes back in time with her friend, and this is a point, she's African American, and her friend is black as well, and her friend is shot. And no matter how many times she goes back in time, no matter what she does, either her friend is like murdered by a policeman, and it does not resolve itself. And I feel like they chose that ending because it speaks volumes of how black people are treated in America, especially by cops. And obviously with the people who are like, oh, this is not complete ending, blah blah blah, maybe they did not understand that maybe they didn't watch it for any sort of political thing, but honestly, for me, everything is political. So, I mean, you cannot separate politics from anything. I feel like it's very intersectional, but that's a whole other thingy discussion point. So, yeah, those perspectives are in my mind, basically, the whole incomplete endings, stuff like that. And so this resonated with me, because of how, as a society, especially in America, we're so attached to happy endings and stuff like that. When in reality, there's not a lot of happy endings. There's not, unfortunately. So it makes sense in media that people want to do happy endings, which honestly, I don't blame them for. I don't blame anyone for that. But it also makes me wonder if we decentered romance, where would our world be, you know? I mean, of course, romance isn't only a Western thing, it's all over the world, I mean, I'm sure, especially in Korean dramas, there's always somebody falling in love with somebody else. But what would have the world been like if we decentered romance? And this is a movie that changed my line of thinking. Um, or at least like made me think about that because she was like, what about my autonomy? What about, my life, you know? But also I love him, and but it's like is this the life I want to have, And it was interesting to see in an older film too because especially with older films, women are kind of limited to, falling in love, getting married, Um, I mean, there's probably more older films that probably have more independent women, but also I remember a lot of pre-codes, especially American pre-codes, which were films made in the early 1930s that didn't really have like morality codes tied to them, centered on many, promiscuous women, women who were single, women who used men, women who did not have permanent relationships with men, and all of the endings were like, oh, they get married, you know. Not every ending, but like most of them. So, seeing this perspective, yes, she is married in the end, so of course, I'm not gonna, it has the similar ending, but also that line of, that thought process that she had in the film, that's a little bit new, at least for me to see in a classic film. And, and also, from the man's perspective, from the guy she's having an affair with, um, he's always thinking, he wants to belong to somebody. He wants somebody to belong to him. He wants to belong to somebody. He wants to, and it also got me thinking, it's like, you know, I mean, are these emotions of wanting to get married, of wanting to have love, are these real? Or are these societal expectations that I've built up just so I don't feel left out? Because, like, I mean, it is so easy. It is so easy to be like, unless you have a really strong, mental, you know, strength and, wanting to be yourself, wanting to stand out, it is so easy to see other people, doing all these similar things and then being like, well, why hasn't that happened to me? Am I not good enough? Am I X, Y, and Z? And that also made me think about that when watching this movie, which is why, it changed my life. Um, and Yeah, it's just a wonderful film. It's on Criterion Collection, but I totally get if people end up hating the woman because she just does she's just so fickle in the film and it's kind of annoying to deal with. But it made me think about those things because if romance wasn't centered in our society, in these types of media, in these types of books, media, just by, even baseline societal perspectives, where would we be now? Where would women be now, especially women, because these are things that are mostly centered by women. Of course, I've encountered men, straight men, gay men who are like, "Oh, I wish I had, a girlfriend. I wish I had a boyfriend." You know, you know. So it's definitely not only women, but also I've seen more women center it um than men, so it's definitely, it makes you think. Of course, the movie isn't like a discourse on that, but it does make you think about, what type of autonomy we're giving up, we're giving into, what type of, you know, life we're setting for ourselves and stuff like that. And I don't know, it just made me think about that. Also, in a personal way, it made me wonder, because like in a long time, like for the longest time, I believed that I wasn't gonna get married or anything. And so it made me wonder, like, what if I got married to the wrong person? What if I, you know, and that kind of emotionally, it kind of made me think about stuff like that and those feelings of just wondering, what these different decisions, also wondering what different decisions, if I make, are going to, what if I made this decision? What if I made that decision? Of course, it doesn't really provide any, it's not going to do me any use, but of course, it's a real thing we think about and some people worry about. But yeah, that was definitely another film that changed my life in terms of, perspective. So it's 32 minutes. I'm at 32 minutes. I'm gonna stop the video here. But yes, this is part one, and I'm definitely going to try to um do a part two, and let's hope it's shorter, and let's hope I don't yap. But I always yap, which is why I do lives. But now my internet sucks, so I can't do live. So we will stick with this. But yes, thanks for watching. If you didn't watch it and you don't care, thank you anyway for clicking on it though.